Chapter 15 is the pair to Chapter 8. That is, they're the two chapters that explore the concept of linguistic voice in the Greek verb. This chapter introduces the passive and fills out the active middle passive picture that in Chapter 8 I asked you to ignore the book over. So we're going to gloss this slightly and not worry too much about the book because I'm not convinced it's the best way to explain it to you. Again, this chapter will be given in two video sections, one covering the basics, including the material you already know, and one looking at some of the extensions of this. So, the idea of the passive. Take these two sentences. A thief stole my bike was stolen. Think about these both logically and grammatically. A thief stole my bike. If you had to parse this, the thief is the subject and he's nominative. And my bike is the object, direct object, and it's accusative. In second sentence, my bike is now the subject and is in the nominative. And the thief has disappeared. Or has he? You could put him back in by a thief. What we've now got is an agent by a thief. And that shows you that in the first sentence, thief is both the subject and the agent. And in the second sentence, there is no direct object, there is only an agent. People often talk about switching the subject and object. It's true, you have promoted the bike from object to subject. And you have removed the agent of the thief to an agent slot that doesn't need to be expressed. But you haven't simply made the subject into an object because there isn't an object in that second sentence. So a thief stole my bike is a basic subject-verb-object sentence. My bike was stolen by a thief is a subject-verb-agent sentence. So what you're doing by moving the sentence from the active into the passive is you're divorcing subject and agent. Because if you take these two sentences, what's more important? Some random person I don't know about now has my bike, or I don't have my bike. My bike has been stolen. That's the important statement. So I prioritised bike by putting it into the linguistically more important position. It's the subject. And that's allowed me to make the statement I really want to make, that is, I'm concerned about my bike. My bike hasn't been stolen. It's just quite a useful Oxford example. So that's the basic idea of the passive. You are promoting the object to subject and divorcing the subject from the agent. But you don't actually need the agent because my bike was stolen is by itself a coherent sentence. In terms of form, there's good news and there's less good news. The good news. In the present and the imperfect, the endings are the same as the middle. You already know them. So in the present and the imperfect, you already know all your endings. Now remember, very few verbs have both an active and a middle. So on the whole, what you're really thinking of is if I see luo, luomai, I know luomai is a passive. If I see a verb that was middle to start off with, then you're going to have to look at the context to decide whether it's passive. Because for the middle verbs, you cannot tell in the present or the imperfect from the word itself whether this is middle or passive. You need to look at the context. Is there an agent expressed, etc. It's not usually too difficult to do. That's the good news. The new stuff is in the aorist and the future. And at this point, if you ever read Daily Dose of Greek, he talks about using the theta as a deck chair, in which you put a man being lazy and lying back in his deck chair, being passive. So you've got a passive man in his deck chair. if you can remember that, you might remember the idea that the theta is the passive marker. How does this show up? Well, in the aorist, instead of a sigma, you've got a theta. And then main in eta, so I'll put that in at this point as well. And then in the future, you've got theta, eta, and the sigma that you might have expected for the future anyway. And then you can add your endings. Eleuthen and leuthes and y. So the future endings should look completely familiar. The aorist endings, then, thes, there, themen, theter, therson, they are the kind of endings that you would expect to see anyway. Eleuthen, thes, there, themen, theter, therson. Those are the kind of aorist endings you've already seen, just with theta eta before them. But this time they're the active endings, because the passive is already marked by theta eta, so why worry about marking it again? So these endings are the kind of thing you would see in an active. It's the theta eta that's showing you it's passive. So theta eta is your passive marker. And if you see that in a verb ending, very, very high likelihood it's a passive, because very few verbs have that kind of theta in their ending elsewhere. That's the end of part 1, the basic idea. To recap, the passive moves object to subject and divorces subject from agent. In the present and the imperfect, the endings are the same as the middle. In the aorist and future, they're characterised by having a theta eta sigma in them. And then active endings in the aorist, middle endings in the future. So you know your endings already. You're looking at a new infix, 2 new letters, 3 new letters to mark what's going on.